guys responded really positively to that. So tonight I will be telling you all about my internship from hell in Curaçao. I hope you're all snuggled up and you're ready to get spooked, because this is scary. So now, with that being said, and of course, as always, without any further ado, let's get into this wild ride of a story, shall we? Alright, let's start at the beginning. So you're gonna notice that this is gonna be slightly different from my usual scary stories, because I won't be reading this story to you guys. I'll just be telling you from my memory. Now, I have got some notes in front of me to get the timeline right. So, as most of you guys know, or some of you know, I am a teacher in day-to-day life. And when I was at uni, to study to become a teacher, one of my courses that I studied was biology. Now, this internship that I was offered was in my last year, and it was gonna be like 50% of my credit at the end of the year, so it was quite important. Now, I really wanted to do an internship abroad for, the experience of it all. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I wanted to grab that with both hands. So this internship in Curaçao was more aimed towards the course that I studied, which was biology. So basically, it was organised by my university, meaning they were in contact with the place that I was supposed to be doing my internship at in Curaçao, and it was a zoo. I was supposed to be going with two girls who also studied biology teaching, and I didn't really know them at all. I had seen them around on campus, but we hadn't really spoken. Now, I didn't mind that so much, because usually I'm kind of a sociable person and I have no problem talking to people and making friends, so that in and of itself was not really an issue for me. Now, like I said, we were supposed to do this internship at Curaçao Zoo, and what we were supposed to do there was do like tours with visitors, which would appeal to the teacher side of my studies, where I would have to explain about the animals and the exhibits. So that was our main task, and then alongside that we would have to do research about the animals there and how we could improve or enrich their living environment, right? So that's what we were supposed to do there, and our uni had been in contact with Curaçao Zoo to sort this internship out, and the only thing we had to do was obviously pay for it, but we also had to find our own accommodation. So we kind of looked around we were obviously very excited for this internship, so, it was a unique opportunity for us. We were excited to do, these tours in the zoo and that, it just all sounded too good to be true, almost, and it was. So, we left around springtime of 2017, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in the beginning of April. Now, we got to Curaçao, and when you get there at the airport, it looks like a Caribbean paradise, right? It looks really exotic, palm trees and, really nice buildings and resorts and complexes. But then we picked up the car that we had rented for the 2 months and we drove down to our house. And as we were driving further and further away from the capital, you could see the area getting rougher and rougher. So when we were almost there, we found ourselves in streets where the houses were all really, they were just falling apart. Basically, you could tell this was an extremely poor area. We also, even before we got to the house, witnessed people in the street clearly under the influence of something, passed out, really not looking well. We saw some shady characters who were trying to slow down our car and refusing to get out of the way when we were driving down that road. And this was all basically in the street that we were staying. Immediately this kind of dream that we were in, and when we saw all these beautiful resorts and beautiful buildings and palm trees and all the exotic beauty, it was kind of instantly wiped away by what we witnessed in the street that we were supposed to be spending the next 2 months in. So we got to the house, and this house, I remember it very well, it was painted pink, so it was a pink house, and it had a driveway with a gate. Now this gate was practically falling apart. It had a chain to close it, and we had a key for the chain and the lock, but this fence wasn't gonna keep anyone out, with all due respect, but this fence was so old and just falling apart, full of rust and wonky and crooked. It wasn't gonna keep anyone out. I mean, you could climb the fence, you could even kick the fence, and it would just completely fall apart. So, one thing that I noticed immediately that was very weird to me was that this house didn't have windows as we know them. There was no glass panes in the window. It was just little wooden, little bits of wood and slightly at an angle, but there was no glass in the windows whatsoever. Somebody could realistically just break those wooden planks. You could poke your fingers through and you would be wiggling your fingers inside one of the bedrooms of our house. That just, when I saw that, that was an instant, a turn off. I was concerned by this when I saw it. It didn't feel very safe to me, and then combined with that really rusty old gate. Now, this house was in the south of the island, and we were very, very close to the ocean, right to the beaches. Now, Curaçao has So I found myself throughout the 2 months on that beach alone a lot. Now, I thought nobody used this beach, but it became very clear that this beach was actively used by addicts. There was an abandoned building adjacent to this beach, and the floor there was covered in needles and spoons and all sorts. So it was quite clear what was going on. Now, obviously, I didn't like this, but I was kind of assuming that all of that stuff was going on during the nighttime, so I wouldn't really be affected by it. Now, the first time we went to the zoo that we were actually supposed to do this internship at, I was mind blown, but not in a good way. So when I think of a zoo, I think of all the zoos that I have visited, and they're always really nice and well kept, and it's expensive to go to a zoo and you get your money's worth. Really nice enclosures and stalls to buy food, and it's a proper park, right? Now, when we got to the Curaçao Zoo, I was just absolutely baffled at what we found there. We got there and the entrance, they had made sort of like a fancy entrance out of plywood and painted it themselves. It looked like an elementary school craft project. It was just so very strange. It seemed so tatty and unprofessional. And then when we actually entered the zoo and we got a tour from the zoo manager, it became clear that this was just incredibly run down. There weren't that many animals, and the animals that they did have were living in very, very poor conditions. The enclosures were way too small. They didn't look like they were well kept. They looked like they were very old and rusty and just horrible in general. We then also found out that this zoo was actually not open to the public, and they had to reconstruct it first, but it hadn't been yet, and the reconstructions hadn't started yet. So immediately it became clear that we were not going to be able to do the task that we were sent there for, which was giving tours to the visitors of the zoo, because visitors weren't allowed there. So they basically used us as free workers to do manual labor. Every day that we were there, our first task was to prepare the food for the animals, which I actually really enjoyed. We had to cut up fruits and that, and prepare all the animals' food, and then we had to feed them, which I was totally okay with. I actually really enjoyed that. But they used us for a lot of manual labor, cleaning out the enclosures, and they had us dig pits in this really rock hard soil in the scorching sun. They had us cut trees, they had us move plants. It was manual labor, and there's no way around it. And even though I didn't mind some of it, feeding the animals, cleaning the enclosures and that, I, by the end of it, even by the middle of this internship, really wasn't in a condition where I could be digging holes in this rock hard soil in the scorching sun. zoo with 3 dead monkeys. Now I can't remember exactly what type of monkeys these were, but apparently they had been kept illegally by someone, and they had broken out of their cages and had been attacking people on the street. So they had to have been. So the person who, I don't know, shot them, captured them, whatever, brought these monkeys to the Curaçao Zoo, and it was our task to wash these dead monkeys. I have no idea why. We are washing dead monkeys. But as soon as they gave me that task, I was like, I'm not touching a dead monkey. Like, I've always been taught, like, don't touch dead animals, like, for risk of diseases. And I feel like if monkeys have a disease, it would definitely be able to be passed on to humans because they're so close to us genetically. So I really didn't want to touch these monkeys, and I just stood there and like opened and closed the tap to wash them. But I really didn't agree with that, and I thought that was absolutely outrageous, and it just again confirmed to me that they were using us. There was also at this zoo one of the employees. There were only 2 employees. There was the manager and then his assistant, and then a guy who was responsible for the botanical garden. They called it that, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't a garden. It was just an overgrown patch of land. Now this guy was possibly one of the creepiest dudes that I met there. He was always very inappropriate, like, you know, touchy and that. He was a lot older than us, by the way, and he would just flirt in a really awkward way. I don't know exactly how old he was, but my best guess is that he was like in his 40s. He also kept inviting us for a barbecue at his house, but there wouldn't be any other guests. It would be just us and him. Like, he was such a creepy guy, and I just got chills every time I had to interact with him. Right, that's enough about the zoo for now. I'll tell you some of the other stuff that happened. So I mentioned before that the beach near our house was used by drug addicts during the night. But then one day I was there on my own and a guy walked up to me. I was obviously freaked out because I was literally the only person on that beach. Now, when he walked up to me, he sat down next to me on my towel and he asked me if I liked the white stuff. I realised he was probably talking about cocaine, so I said to him, like, I don't do drugs. He then asked me, do you have some white stuff? So again, I told him no, and then he asked me if I wanted some. So again, I said no, I don't do that kind of thing. He finally gave up asking me about the white stuff, and he walked off, and I thought, you know, that's the end of it. He's going to leave me alone. But I was just being naive. He picked up a coconut from the floor and he started smashing it onto a palm tree. He then walked back over to me and he had made a hole into this coconut. And then he asked me if I wanted to drink from it, which, if I can ever give you a piece of advice, is to not accept coconut juice from a drug addict. So obviously I wasn't going to do that. And I was kind of, you know, I was very panicked at that point. just told him, I'm allergic to coconut and stuff. I absolutely cannot have coconut. And then he said, oh, what's the problem? You don't want to share with me? Do you want your own? And he just walked off to find another coconut. And at that point, I just booked it. I grabbed my towel and I just ran as fast as I could back to our little house. And luckily, he didn't follow me. Now, that wasn't the last time that I would be seeing him, however. There was another incident where I had actually convinced the two girls that I was with to come with me to the beach. And we were sat there and we were kind of chit-chatting, and all of a sudden we see the same, like the coconut guy, we see him approaching us. So all three of us went into the ocean and started swimming, just pretending that we hadn't seen him. We figured he probably wouldn't follow us into the ocean. Wrong again, he did. He started coming for us, like he also started swimming and he swam towards us. We were absolutely terrified. He eventually reached us and started talking to us, but somehow he seemed in an even worse state mentally than when he offered me the coconut, because we couldn't really make out what he was trying to say. So once again, we kind of told him off and we booked it. We went back to the house. Now, that wasn't the only creepy incident, or the only two creepy incidents that happened on that beach. So, you might think, why do I keep going back to this beach, right? But you've got to keep in mind that while I was there, I was completely and utterly scared for my life. I was terrified in that house. I hated spending time in that house. And I wanted to get away from it as much as I possibly could. So, for me, really the only option that would be relatively safe was going to that beach, rather than, walking around the streets near our house, because clearly they were riddled with dodgy people. So that would have definitely not been safe for me either. Now, one time, me and the two girls were on the beach and we were sat chatting. Now, all of a sudden, a jeep drives onto the beach. And with a jeep, it's like the back of it is open to put the stuff in that you're transporting. So this jeep drives onto the beach, and as it drives past us, I noticed that the passenger, the person sitting on the passenger side in the front, really wasn't looking well. Like, he looked very ill to me. He was really pale, and he was kind of slouched over and like leaning against the window. And then this jeep comes to a stop about 10 meters away from us, really not that far. And the driver gets out of the car, and the passenger that was sat in the back seat also got out of the car. And then they both walk around to the back of the jeep and they pull out like one of these plastic garden chairs. It was a white chair, I remember it like it was yesterday. So they pull out this chair out of the back of the jeep that was open, and they put it down next to the passenger seat in the front, where the guy was sat that I noticed wasn't feeling well. So as they opened the door, this guy nearly fell out, but they caught him. Now, all the while this was happening, I was sat there on the beach looking at it, like completely frozen in sheer terror, right? So they put this man in the white plastic garden chair. They each grab an armrest. They pick up the chair with the man in it and they start walking towards the ocean. Now, at this point, it was clear to me that the guy who was now in the chair was not alive anymore. It's weird. I mean, he wasn't moving. He was just kind of like hanging there. He was really pale. I remember him being really skinny as well. And they were carrying him to the ocean. So at that point, I realised, they're trying to dump this body essentially in the sea. So I told the girls, we need to get out of here now because we have seen this, we have witnessed this. Now, I remember, I think the girls were kind of reluctant to leave because they wanted to see what they were actually going to do with this guy. But I didn't wait. I basically dragged them by their arms and I was like, no, we need to run, like we need to go now. So we ran as fast as we could and I kept looking behind me to see if we were going to get followed, but we didn't, luckily. And we made it to the house, which was only like 100 meters from where the beach was, and I was scared to death that they were going to try and figure out which house we were in. Now, luckily that didn't happen though, and we never saw those men again, but it really left a lasting impression on me. There's also two other things that happened at the house that made me feel extremely unsafe there. So, the first one was actually a recurring incident, so it would happen over and over and over again, every couple days or every day sometimes. So, in the evening, we would be sat outside on the patio, and then we would hear a commotion, and we would hear somebody shouting and smashing stuff. So one time we went to the gate to have a look at who it was and what they were doing, and it was a guy with an axe. Like, I'm not joking, he was yielding an axe and he was smashing cars with it and shouting in a language I didn't understand. And this would happen over and over and over again. And I just thought, he has an axe and we have windows that are just little wooden planks on the side of the street. So I was terrified, absolutely terrified, that he was going to smash those and try to get in. Luckily that never happened, otherwise I don't think I would be sat here today. Another incident was also one evening when it was dark, and I remember being in my bedroom and one of the girls I was with came out of her bedroom with tears in her eyes, and you could tell from her face that she was absolutely terrified. And I asked her what was wrong, and she said, "Go look at my window in the bedroom." So me and the other girl, we went in to check. Now when we went in, she had this, we all had these, like a really thin curtain covering the window, and you could see from behind that curtain the outline of a man stood there. This girl's window was on the street side, so somebody was clearly stood on the street, really close to her window and trying to look in through those gaps between the wooden planks. I'm not certain what we did. We didn't actively try to chase him away. I think one of us screamed and he eventually left. I really can't remember that, but I vividly remember me stepping into a dark was so horrible, and it was also cockroach infested, so that really made me not want to be there, like spend as little time as possible there. Now, of course, I contacted my university about the issue that I was feeling unsafe, and that, you know, that the area that we were staying in really wasn't suitable for three female university students on their own. Now, the university told me that we would be able to change accommodations, but only if all three of us agreed. Now, you probably won't believe me when I say this, but these two other girls, they didn't agree. And it was for money reasons. They said, you know, we're not going to get back our money for this accommodation, and then on top of that we would have to pay for a different one, and it's just going to get too expensive. Now, it wasn't like any of us were poor. Our parents were paying for our internships, and I'm sure, you know, to all of our parents, our safety was more important than spending an extra few hundred. But they didn't want to, so we stayed. Now, at this point, you know, I was a shell of myself, basically. I barely ate because of stress. I didn't sleep. I was extremely sleep deprived because I was so terrified. And then add like the bloody exotic flesh-eating mosquitoes into the mix, and you know, I wasn't sleeping a wink. So I just kind of became this shell, this shadow of myself, and it was really hard to see. I got really skinny as well. I just really wasn't doing great, and my family was trying to convince me to come back home, and then I just made the decision to stay, which, if I was ever in that position again, I would never make that decision. But back then, I was young, I was naive, I didn't want to fail my internship, seeing as it was for like half of my credit. So I stayed. Now, when we were over halfway in this internship, a girl, also a student, moved into the house next to us. We kind of had like a shared backyard, and when I say yard, it wasn't a yard, it was concrete. But it was shared, it was a shared area. So she moved in, and she was from Germany. I'm never going to forget. And I just remember she was so excited and motivated to start her own internship. She did it at a dolphinarium in Curaçao, and she studied something to do with like animal care or something like that. I can't remember exactly what she studied, but she was going to do an internship in a dolphinarium. I think she might have even studied marine biology, but I'm not sure. So it was hard for me because at this point I was already barely a person anymore, and I wanted to socialise with this girl because of who I am, but it was hard for me because she was so excited to start this internship, and I just didn't have anything positive to say whatsoever. Then at one point, I think about 2 weeks into her internship, all of a sudden I saw her, and she had come home with a cast on her leg. So I asked her about it, like, what happened? Turns out she was walking on the street, on the footpath, on her own in the evening, and somebody deliberately drove onto the footpath and, you know, basically ran her over. And and she was very shaken up by this incident, as you can imagine, like one would be. And from that point onwards, I just remember her saying about how much she wanted to leave and how much she hated it there. It also turned out that they were using her as well, in her place of, where she was doing the internship at the dolphinarium, and they were taking advantage of her as well. So it really wasn't good. But I stayed, and I still beat myself up for it, that I didn't value my safety more. That, to me, getting that diploma and passing that internship was more important than my life. I am still extremely disappointed in myself. Now, all things, even bad things, come to an end at one point, and after 2 months, we left Curaçao. Now, the aftermath of this internship was enormous. After returning, I developed an anxiety disorder. I frequently had anxiety attacks that were just completely debilitating for me. I also developed chronic nightmares. And when I say chronic nightmares, according to the definition of chronic, it has to occur at least once a week or something like that. But for me, it was all night, every single night. I would have very graphic and very horrible nightmares, to the point where it was just completely affecting my whole life, and I had to get some therapy for it. So I remember I had EMDR therapy, which is eye movement reprocessing treatment. I'm not going to get into the specifics of it, but it worked. I mean, I'm not, even to this day, and it's been 5 years, I'm not nightmare free. But the nightmares have become a lot less frequent. I'd say I struggle with nightmares now about once a week or once every 2 weeks. So it has improved massively. But at one point I just couldn't function in a normal way anymore. So, I mean, I think I've come a long way, and I'm doing absolutely great at the moment. Do I regret going on this internship? I mean, if you wanted a yes or no answer, I would say yes. I mean, it was the most terrified I've ever been in my life, and it was incredibly demanding on my mind and my body. If I could go back to my last year at uni and chosen to still go for an internship abroad, but a different destination, I probably still would have done it. Right, that was about the extent of the events. I mean, there were other small bits and pieces that happened there, but if I told you literally everything that happened over a 2-month period, we'd be sitting here until tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble. Thank you so much for choosing to hang out with me again tonight. And if there is one thing that you need to learn from my story, is to always choose your safety and your health above anything else, and especially above work and studies is left for me to do is to wish you a very, 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 very good night. Good night. Good night. Sleep well. And I will see you guys next week.